So I'm Rob Schmults. I'm a general partner at Blockchange Ventures. And while we are not a DePIN focused fund, we've probably done about a dozen or so investments in the DePIN space, including Fluence, where Tom is a co-founder. What I'm really excited about and getting a chance to chat with Tom about is he's not just a co-founder of Fluence, which I'm actually going to let him walk us through what Fluence does and how it's leveraging the DePIN model. But he's also kind of an OG and thinker in the space as well. And so I think what you'll learn today is not just about Fluence, but the lessons Tom has learned, both as an early participant in the blockchain space, helping build and launch Hedera, which is where he was before he co-founded Fluence. But Tom's also very active as a kind of ecosystem player. So he runs DePIN Days, and I think we just had our 10th DePIN Day yesterday, and I think I've been to 5 of them, and yesterday was best of the 5. I mean, they keep getting bigger and better, which I guess is no surprise to this audience. Tom also runs a podcast where he interviews DePIN founders. So he's in a really good position, I think, to share lessons as well as tell us about Fluence. But maybe, Tom, let's start with Fluence. I think it's one of the earlier DePINs, right? I mean, Filecoin is often acknowledged as one of the first, but Fluence is certainly among the earliest. So can you tell us a little more about what Fluence does?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're a lot of things, but Filecoin, Helium, there's an Arweave, there's a number that are, it's certainly before us and certainly launched before us. And so we've been building for a while, but we are a decentralized compute platform, and you hear that a lot, but we are CPU focused, not GPU. And so a lot of the compute platforms you see out there, IONET, even Akash now, are GPU focused, and we are CPUs, and GPUs are used obviously to train LLMs, train AI models. And that is a enormously important use case, will only grow, but there are billions of CPUs, and those CPUs perform all the work that we use on a day-to-day basis right now. When you're picking a movie on Netflix, when you're searching kayak for a flight, when you want your Uber to arrive, those calculations, all that is happening obviously on CPUs. And importantly, most of the nodes that run blockchain are CPUs and are sitting in Amazon data centers. And so the kind of hidden secret is that our whole world of decentralization is actually powered by centralized companies and centralized data centers.
And Tom, just kind of building on that, one thing I heard you share yesterday that I was really struck by is one of those insights that when you hear, you kind of, you can't unsee it in a way. But you talked about how if we looked at the progression of blockchain projects and also DePIN projects, if you look at Bitcoin, it started out individual miners, the archetypal, computer in the basement. Now they're publicly traded companies, massive scale, sitting next to power plants to be able to manage that scale. And you went through kind of project after project, and this transformation from sort of solo node runners and what have you, solo DePIN owners into more institutional. You saw that early on, and I think one of the things that's interesting about Fluence is you guys went right to, if I get it right, I think kind of industrial or institutional scale. So tell us a little bit more about that, if you will.
I mean, I guess the way I think about it is that economics dictate that as any hardware-dependent project scales, the infrastructure, the economies of scale dictate advantages to those larger players, right? And so the person who is individually mining in the basement doesn't have the purchasing power that a larger company does in terms of scale, doesn't have the same level of, power and other purchasing power. So the bigger you are, the more efficient you are, the lower your costs are, the more, and that just add that sort of that benefit scale just compounds. And you saw Bitcoin, you see with Filecoin, you see it, but then you also see it in DePIN projects. So you see Demo, which is a basically data for your car, individual drivers. Now fleets are adopting it. You see HiveMap where individual drivers do it, but also now fleets are picking it up, right? So it doesn't even have to be the virtual DePIN. So we've seen that, but what we would rather referencing is we started with top tier data centers as the partners for our decentralized compute platform, with a view that if adoption is our goal, And all that matters ultimately here is adoption revenue. The path to that is far easier if you could explain to your customers that their compute is happening in the same data centers, the same tier 4 data centers that Web2 companies use. That makes life a lot easier in driving adoption than them thinking or knowing their compute is spread around a bunch of individual consumers' computers in their basements. And that's obviously a terrific vision for the community involvement. And so we would love to get to the place where we can have a much larger footprint of contributors. And I think we will get there, but adoption will come faster if we, and then the technology we build is easier if we start with, this type of institutional grade infrastructure from the beginning. And it doesn't mean it's not decentralized either, because it's an open platform and you can switch provider to provider easily. And I think that is, that's also very important. You're still very different than Amazon or Google. You don't need to have 10,000 individual providers in order to be decentralized.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, I think too, it speaks to the thoughtfulness that you and the team at Fluence have really brought to the work you've been doing. And, you mentioned that, there were projects that launched before you because you take a while to build. But I think the results and kind of the traction you're getting now speak to the importance of getting it right, especially if you are targeting, larger and institutional customers. One area I think that you've been very thoughtful on, and certainly our expectation is that you guys are getting it right, it is around both not just the DePIN model, but also the tokenomics, which go hand in hand. And a point I've heard you make very eloquently that I think is a good lesson maybe for the audience as well is that, the TGE, the token generation event, isn't a finish line. In many ways, it's a starting line. So, I'd love for you to share a little bit some of the points you were making the other day about how you, structure your tokenomics to support its health going forward.
Well, I wish I could say our token looked really healthy if you look at the graph, but that's I don't think that's the case for many tokens right now, unfortunately. But you can get the architecture right, and hopefully over time things catch up to that. But I think in DePIN it's certainly revenue focused, particularly for physical DePINs, and so I'm a big believer in the buy burn model. And I think you've seen some projects deploy that incredibly effectively. When you have a network based system like we use, or marketplace oriented, we're not really taking the revenue. If we take anything, we'd be small. So you're really, you're serving as a middle network between the customer and the provider. So buy burn is less effective there. So what we've done is you have to engender trust and get trust in the network, because you have the brand and the billions of dollars spent building the trust in Amazon and Google have. So that is solved by cryptoeconomics, where there is stake required to turn on any CPU. And what we've done is we made the stake, it's in our token Fluence, FLT, but it is denominated in dollars. And so you need $12,000 of FLT to activate any CPU. And so that allows the network to be secure, because people who use the network know there's that much dollar worth at risk. And if the token is low, you got to buy more of it. If it's high, you need less of it. But that at least leads to at least a more stable security model than if it was an arbitrary number of tokens, which value could shift dramatically over time, and does shift dramatically over time. And so that's one piece. And the other component of it, I think, is scale, where I think the era of showing the market a massive amount of supply and getting rewarded for that supply is done. And I think people know there's a lot of supply for DePIN networks. It's about the actual use of the customers. And so we're also being very deliberate in scaling the CPUs on the network so that they are linked with the actual demand for those CPUs in the network, because any CPU on the network we're paying rewards to, also in dollars, but in FLT. And so we want to be very careful that we're not scaling the supply in advance of the demand, because that's not a sustainable model ultimately. It may have worked early on in the cycle, but it's not, we wouldn't get the value for it now.
Yeah, and I love how the token, you guys did just create like a side project known as your token, but it's instrumental to how Fluence works. And then it's also structured in such a way so that it's, self-reinforcing, it's self-supporting. I think you already started to hint at some answers to my next question, but as I mentioned, Tom runs, with some help, runs DePIN Days and also runs a podcast focused in the DePIN space. So you probably talk to almost as many DePIN founders as I do, maybe even more. And I'd love to hear some of the what are the key takeaways that you've maybe drawn from those conversations in terms of maybe give us a what's a lesson, good lesson, and maybe a don't do if you're a DePIN founder in the audience tonight.
Well, I guess you probably talked to more of them. I just talked to them after they've gotten funding. So that's probably the way it works. And, but
Your partnership.
yeah, exactly. Listen, I think I've had on the DePIN podcast, we recorded 3 episodes today. So I think, we're probably 50, I guess, somewhere in that range right now. And actually over that time, at least one, if not 2 projects have gone out of business. So, but not many, but a couple. That's going to happen. And I think what I am most interested in DePIN is finding, or I think is compelling, is people that have domain expertise outside of crypto and come in and use crypto to actually scale their networks. And so, what I think is interesting is a bunch of layer ones in DeFi are crypto native people, and that's what it takes to be successful. But in the DePIN space in particular, there's lots of founders who have deep expertise in one area and then realize, wow, I can actually create a incredibly capital efficient model that can compete with the established centralized incumbents really effectively if I leverage crypto economics and crowdsource the CapEx effectively. And so what I've been most impressed about, I think founders that are working well are those that come from incredibly niche areas that we would never know of before, and that apply the sort of getting to understand and adopt the crypto economics and apply it to that sector. So that's the thing that's worked, I think, that's worked the best, I think.
And then, I should, and to answer your question, sorry,
The one thing project that didn't work was a founder not from that particular area that came a little bit more crypto economics focused, and that didn't work.
Yeah, because they might not have had the network, known the real nuances in business. You touched on something just briefly. You said that the word demand, and I know that's been a focus of yours, is building demand for Fluence. How are we doing if we declare DePIN to be an industry, which I know is a misnomer, but let's just use it for now. How are we doing on kind of demand side focus? Are you seeing enough there?
Well, listen, this is something I mentioned a little bit yesterday. I got to be careful how I say this, but it's the problem with DePIN crypto overall is I could say we have any number of revenue out there, and there's no auditor we have. There is no one's checking the customer lists. Like, people say all kinds of numbers in terms of what the actual revenue is. And so I was saying industry-wise, you have to be careful, and that buy burn, like 80% plus buy burn, that conversely, when you do that, that is more provable than an auditor, right? That's public. It's out there. You see the price. You see the tokens burn. That is the most clear and irrefutable a demonstration of what revenue you have. And so I think if you look at the general numbers out there, there's a lot of big numbers. There are 2 DePIN projects that claim 75 million in ARR. Neither one of those does buy burn. And so when those guys do buy burn at 80% levels, then I will really believe it. But up to now, there are plenty of projects that are 2-3 million that are very credible. And I think 2025 is going to be a big year for revenue growth. And I think ultimately the projects that have either a staking model like Fluence or high buy burns are going to trade premium because investors are going to see it and trust it because they can validate that revenue and see how we're cruising token.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we've just got about a minute left. What's next for Fluence? What are you most excited about? I know we're 2 months in, but just looking ahead to maybe 25 and even beyond.
Listen, I think this is a really important year for Fluence. We launched the network here at DePIN Day, but in East Denver last year. So we're coming on a year of that, and we have a pipeline of $6 or $10 million worth of ARR. We've got to close that pipeline. We have to scale up our CPUs and get that going. I'm super excited to actually start turning up on the DePIN Ninja tables with revenue. That's the most important thing. That's what we have to do. So excited about that. There's a number of product updates that we're going to be making on our pipeline this year to make us more institutionally kind of relevant. You could have products for years, right? But a couple of them will make a big difference. So very excited about that. I'm excited about this whole sector overall and what we're going to see kind of in DePIN across a whole number of projects.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks, Tom, and thanks to all of you for hearing us out.
Great. Thanks, Rob. Appreciate it.